All right, and welcome back to Xerocon. I'm sitting here with CEO of Xero, Rod Drury. Rod, in your keynote, there's a couple of really interesting things popped up, and one of them kind of came out of left field, and I think the audience was sitting there thinking, what's he talking about here? And that was the assurance dashboard, and it seemed to be part of a much bigger picture. I like the concept behind the assurance dashboard. Where does this end up? What's the thinking behind it? Where's it going?
Yes, I'm really pleased you picked up on that. We've been doing this business for 8 years now, and we've really thought about this as a platform, and it's great. As we've sort of finished a lot of the kind of boring accounting software you need to do, credit notes, purchase orders, we can now do some of the things we've really been dreaming about doing and peel a bit more sort of layers from the onion. So what we're trying to do, we have this broader concept of the financial web, and that's how, and what we're trying to do there is using this electronic connectivity between small businesses and banks. How do we open up lending and open up capital to small business? So the financial web is addressing the problem for banks. It's too expensive, it's too risky, it's too fragmented, trying to get down to small business. And what we need to do to be able to get banks lending down is take a lot of that risk out. And what we noticed was, under desktop software, you pull your bank statements in, you get receipts and invoices from end customers and suppliers, all those things. You manually type them into a computer, or you upload, download. Then you might do some reconciliations, you'll print out some reports, but to get integrity in those reports will be a very expensive audit process, which no one likes. It doesn't add any value, it's just checking things. In the cloud world, we have secure connections. So, we have direct connections coming from bank straight to Xero, which no one's touched. We have, with the Xero network, small businesses sending electronic invoices that no one's touched. We have files that have the source documents. Xero Connect now is large businesses sending invoices in. So a lot of the checks that you would have to do in audit don't really need to be done in cloud software. So what the assurance dashboard does is put a viewer which allows the accountant to very, very quickly ascertain the integrity of the data. So for example, they can see who's had access to the system, they can see these are the bank accounts which are connected, were any bank transactions added or deleted, and then we can run some of their standard audit checks, like are there suppliers with the same bank account number, common bit of fraud and not-for-profits. Where are the large invoices? Do they have source documents? Did they come through electronically? Are there invoices that have been post-dated, and all those sort of things?
So it's essentially tools for auditing the numbers, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's not so much auditing. That's why we use the word assurance. It's about a professional advisor understanding the system's connectivity and controls inside Xero, and then putting their reputation to say, we believe in the integrity of the numbers, which again, that means a small business owner is just dealing with better numbers every day. But if we can get this idea of continuous certification of the numbers, that must make it easier for banks to lend down to small business.
So if you're basically dividing all the data in a Xero file between stuff that's come from reliable sources,
yes,
and stuff that's come from manual sources where there could be some kind of questionable intervention.
Yes.
And do you see that over time as the volume of data in manually entered stuff coming more from trusted sources through network effects and that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing that now. So, in some countries, there's manual bank feeds. Now we have direct bank feeds. Some feeds are through Yodlee. Some feeds are directly from bank. We're getting large business now connecting in, so larger invoices or frequent invoices are being coming through electronically through the system. So absolutely over time we'll see a greater proportion. And there could be good reasons why there's been manual transactions, but at least you can absolutely see those. So we're now using software to get rid of all of that manual checking, which adds no value. And what we're doing really, when you think about the audit process, auditing is a very low value service, and it's a very low margin service for even audit specialists. For small businesses, they often won't pay that money, and as soon as it's done, it's already 3 or 4 months out of date. It's not really suitable for lending. So what we're saying is, if we can put those controls inside the cloud software and make that visible and put alerts in that, so that we're comfortable that a business is flying within a certain envelope for lending, we can come up with this idea of continuous certification, and then the value the accountant adds is their intellectual property, their brand, their trust, their reputation. So we've moved audit to be a service which has margin.
So one of the accountants said to me, 90% of the accountants now wouldn't have got it because they don't do audit, and it made me think, well, maybe they wouldn't understand the value of having a business or explain to their client why it's great to have a business that has continuously certified data. But do you see this connecting at some point to that VEDA directory where you have businesses with credit scores, maybe also if the small business has its data certified, like it becomes like an easy thing to achieve that has some value in some way. What value would that be to the business?
Yeah, so this is
in doing business
absolutely.
with them,
so this is all part of things that we can do to So now what we're seeing is that well-designed cloud accounting software like Xero has high integrity financial data for the very first time. Very different to what desktop software does. Not even possible with desktop software, and I think better than any other cloud software because we've thought about this for years, and now we can really start to talk about it. So we've engineered those controls into Xero for several years now. So now we're just providing a viewer over that, and that then creates the tools for accountants to be comfortable with this concept of continuous certification. We need to do work with the industry bodies, and we need to do work with the banks to educate them. So hopefully we can come up with this new level, which is basically auditing or being comfortable with the management accounts of a business. What we're doing with VEDA is, if you think about customer relationship management in a cloud world, normally in a CRM system, you only have data that you've typed in yourself. Well, in the cloud, there's already data sources out there. So what we're doing with VEDA, and they're been investing heavily in this in the last year, is taking the enterprise service and bundling it down through web services so we can consume it as part of a small business product. So when you connect to a business, or put a business in, you can connect to them and get a whole lot of other information about how they trade and those things. Often though, credit scoring is how small businesses pay large businesses. There's not a lot of information about how small businesses pay small businesses, which is what's important to small business. So we can see a range now. If you have this kind of certified numbers, potentially we could do things like put a badge up and say, we pay our bills within 14 days, we pay by the 20th of the month, 100%. And so we can then create a positive scoring, and people, like their Uber ratings, want to keep those ratings up so they pay their bills. And if we can increase the velocity of cash, Chris Ridd in his keynote this morning, Andy Larkin in his keynote this morning talked about our Xero signals, where we're looking inside those $300 billion of transactions we saw last year. 85% in invoices in Australia are more than 15 days late. So if we can create positive behaviour and reward good behaviour, that increases the cash flow of business.
The virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
And so the other thing which been part of the financial web, which is really interesting, is the potential for banks to work with software. And NAB was on stage talking about the API integration. What do you see as the list of things that you can do? We touched on a couple of them, but what do you think is on the top priority for the banks in doing things with accounting software?
Yeah, so NAB really gets this stuff, and we've been working with them for a few years now. We announced a partnership quite a few months ago, and they've been investing behind their firewall. So all banks have different things that they do, but what we're trying to do is create the next sort of baseline of online financial services that connect banks to small business. So we see three main services. The first one being the provisioning of feed link between bank feeds and accounting software, and at that two-way connection and your first load. So being able to provision that connection inside internet banking and say, I want to go back to the 1st of July and get all of those transactions. That creates that electronic link. The second service we see is batch payment upload, so that say you've got 40 invoices to pay, the bookkeeper who's doing quite a bit of the work, once those workflow has approved those bills to be paid, they should be able to push them into a secure airlock inside internet banking. Then the business owner might get a ping on their mobile phone to say, hey, you've got 40 new items, they've come from Bob the bookkeeper through the secure Xero to NAB channel. Are you happy with that? Yes, click, done, gone. So
that will be through the bank's app?
Yeah, through the bank's app. So we don't want to make payments out of Xero. We don't need that risk.
Right.
Banks have all the security systems around that. So that's why we want to put our payments into an airlock, a holding place, so that you use the bank security and their mobile applications to actually originate the payment. But the bookkeeper or the accountant or the savvy small business owner can do all of that workflow. And then the third thing we see is we presented, it was well over 100 million invoices last year, and our customers made billions and billions, tens of billions of dollars of payments. So what we want to see is the ability to pay in a business-to-business fashion using your internet banking and not having to jump onto a credit card, because you're not going to, for a $5,000 bill, you're not really going to pay by your credit card. You don't want people to pay you by credit card because you don't want to pay 2.5% on the transaction. So
it's automating the bank-to-bank transactions.
Exactly. So using that payment airlock and a whole lot of combinations of mobile banking for triangulation, we should be able to present an invoice on a mobile device or through your inbox, and then quickly pay that through your bank channels, so you don't have to pay a transaction fee for that.
Okay. So the bank's not losing, even though the business owner might not need to, or the bookkeeper might not need to go into the online banking to process a transaction. The bank still has control through the mobile app and that final point of approval.
Yeah, and we're saying, let's not default everything to a credit card, which just takes money out of the transaction for somebody. Let's use the great banking systems we have in Australia and New Zealand. And with both banks now, with most banks now, we have interbank settlement happening multiple times a day, so you've pretty much got real-time transactions, so let's leverage that investment. And because we're presenting so many invoices, that's really got on the bank's radar. So those are kind of what we used to call kind of the banking 2.0 services. That's the next generation of online banking interfaces. What we're also seeing now is, banks, obviously, they make money from lending and other financial services. If we're using our financial web to reduce risk, part of that is building direct connectivity between accounting software and their lending workflows. So that gets rid of a lot of the cost of loan applications. Again, getting rid of that barrier to enable the flow of capital and debt into small business.
So what do you think is going to come first? Are we going to be seeing the ABA files go? Are we going to see the bank feeds, or is it going to be the mobile payments, or the direct debits? Or will it be the financial services side? Like, what are the banks most interested in doing first?
So with banks, they've usually got a big roadmap of projects, and sometimes you get lucky and in an area they're just starting to play with, or they've already put in a core system which makes these projects quite straightforward. So often the timing or delay with banks is just where do you sit in their priorities and what else is going on inside the bank. If you're doing a big core systems rewrite, everything freezes for 2 years. But I think a lot of banks have come through that process now, and I think we're seeing a lot of velocity happening and a lot of innovation happening. And also because the cloud accounting industry is so large, we're now 250,000 customers in Australia. That's probably 10% of all businesses. That's material. So it's not like here's a startup with a good idea. We're actually bringing customers. We've paid 400,000 Australians last year, so we're moving billions of dollars now in payroll every month. So we have the volumes that this is on the radar, and so we're now seeing banks investing inside their firewall. And as the first bank really gets this, I think this drives other banks to catch up. And it's great for the first bank because they have this rolling wave of innovation, and our accounting community gets really excited about using these new products. And if we can be showing that investment is worthwhile for the banks and driving new sign-ups and new revenue to them, they'll continue to invest. So it's a really exciting time for small business.
Okay, let me rephrase. Out of those 4 options, financial services are the other 3. If you were a bank, what would you do first?
Well, I think the order is get the provisioning first, because that gets the two-way connectivity. Batch payment upload, getting rid of that ABA file and doing that through web services is a real productivity win for small businesses. And I think within a year or so, that payment mechanism will become pretty standard around Australia.
Fantastic. Right,
Thanks
very
Sholto.
much for your time.
Cool.
Awesome.